Okay, so now we have the capability of enrolling into a section. Notice that the seats were updated, right? Because I just enrolled there. Now what we'd like to be able to do is perhaps right after enrolling, one of the things that we could do is navigate to the student's profile, and the student profile could perhaps show a list of all the sections and courses that they're enrolled in, right, with the correct seat numbers and for that particular student, right? And vice versa, right? We would be able to ask the question both ways. We could say, hey, giving a student, give me all the sections that this student is enrolled in, or vice versa, given a section, give me all the students that are enrolled in this particular section, right? Those two questions are valid. From an administrator's point of view, I would like to be able to give you the, perhaps it could be from right here, I could add a button that will allow me to see the enrollments, right? Who's enrolled in this section, right? If I click that button, I navigate and see, all these students are enrolled in this section. Perhaps even being an admin, I could unenroll somebody, perhaps, right? Or being a student, I would see my profile. I would see all the sections that I'm enrolled in. So let's take a look at first at being able to see from the student's point of view which sections I'm enrolled in. Yes.
We also need to account
If you click on enrollment twice.
Yeah. So if you're like a student.
Yeah, like enroll twice.
Yeah,
That would be a nice validation, but it's not required. You could invalidate the button and ignore any double clicks or things like that on the client side. That'd be a nice validation to do. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at this, right? So let's first be able to perhaps navigate to the profile when I click on enrollment. So let's implement that first. Let's see, on the client side, we have the list of enrollments here in the HTML, and so when I click on button, it's being handled in this enrollment, and here's the enrollment. Now this enrollment right now, it's not doing anything with what's coming back from the service, right? But what we could do here is that we could listen for the response, right, that comes back from the server, and we could just ignore it for now. What we could do is that we could navigate, right? We could navigate to the profile, and to do that, we'll need a route. I'm not sure if we have a route somewhere here. We do. We have activated route. Oh no, we don't have a router. All right, so let's have a router. Let's inject here a router. It's of type router, I believe. Router. And once we have the router, we can now programmatically navigate. Here we could say this dot router dot navigate, and we can provide as argument where do we want to navigate to. So profile. All right. All right. Once we are in the profile, we would like to perhaps not only go and fetch the personal information from this student, right? First name, last name, address, email, and whatnot, right? We would like to also perhaps fetch all the sections for that particular student. Yes. So let's see. If we navigate to the profile, let's go to the profile. Let's see, profile. Now that we're in the profile, notice that we're fetching the profile information from this user. We could fetch them simultaneously. There's no need to make them sequential, run one after another, like wait one for the other. So we could do here something like this dot section service, right? We could do something like find enrollments for student, right? And then this could come back with, then this presumably would come back with the enrollments. or actually no, let's call it find sections for students, and this might be sections, and we would populate a local sections variable with the sections that comes back from the server, something like that, right? Okay, none of this is implemented. We'll need to do it from scratch. Okay. All right. So let's see. We don't have a service. We don't have a section. So let's declare these sections here. All right, we need to populate sections. It'll be an array, an empty array for now. Okay. And we don't have a service here, section service. Let's implement a section service. I thought we had a section service. Don't we have a section service? Services. We do have a section service. All right, so let's inject it and call it section service. So there it is. So it'll be private section service of type section service. Section service. There it is. Okay, we have it. What we don't have is find sections for students. We don't have that. So let's implement that. Let's go into that service. Let's implement it. So this will be something like find sections for student. We don't need the student IDs because presumably this person is logged in, and that's on the server side. We just have to remember to pass in the credentials, to include the credentials. So the URL might look something like what? So let's see, const URL. It might look like http //localhost, localhost 4000. So again, this is also a relationship, right? This is a bidirectional relationship. Give me the student, I can give you all the sections. Give me the section, I can give you all the students. So I can go both ways, right? So this will be student, right? From the student, I want the sections. But notice that I'm not passing the student ID. Presumably, the server already knows this. But if I want to go to the other way, where I have the section, give me the students, then I would have to pass in the ID of that section. Yes? All right. All right. Let's see. So I have the URL. We can do a return fetch, and this would be the URL. This will be a get. So it's already a get. That's the default. So I don't need to configure that. But we can't forget to pass in the credentials, and that's it, right? Now this probably will come back with a response. Let's unwrap the response and parse the body into a JSON. So let's do that here. So then this is going to come back with a response, and we're going to return the response.JSON. Okay, so on the client side, the only thing that we're doing is that we're grabbing that information and we're passing it to the sections, right? Notice that on the template we don't have anything rendering that. So for now, let's render it. Let's say right here under all the private information, right? Their first name and last name and whatnot. Let's put a H2 here and do sections. And for now, let's just render a sections.length. Right. So for now it's just 0. Right. If we enroll, it'll be just 0. Make sense? Right. So if I go to a profile right now, right? If I go back and log in, and this is PO and PO, right? Right now the sections is 0. I don't have any sections. Right. It went out to the server. It came back right now. Notice that there are no sections. The server doesn't even know about this query, but it's defaulting to an empty array. So okay, let's move on to the server, right? And then we'll come back to how to render this. Okay. All right. So let's do that. Let's go on the server side. On the server side, we need to listen for that incoming request, and the request looks like this. Let's do that on the section side. Let's see. Do we have a section service? There's a section service. And this will look something like app.get, listening for that incoming, and this will be, I'm going to follow the same naming convention as the component. It'll be a find sections for student, right? This will be find sections for student, and it'll be implemented right here. It'll be function, request response, so this one is going to need the enrollment model, right? This enrollment model that says, well, I have half of an enrollment. I know the student. I don't know the sections, right? So I need all the enrollments where this student is this particular ID, right? So I need the current user. So var the current user. So this will be request.session dot current user, and I can grab the user ID or the student ID from the current user dot underscore ID. Now that I have the ID, I want to ask the enrollment, grab me all the enrollments where the student is this ID. Okay, so for that I can it would look something like this. It would be enrollment model dot. I'll use the same exact name. I'll pass in the student ID, right? And presumably this will come back with all the enrollments. From the database, and I'm just going to send it back to the client, right? So this will look something like response, send back all the enrollments. Yes? All right. But this is not implemented in the model, right? The model is not really doing anything, right? Notice that we're implementing this from the client's point of view, right? The client needs this, right? So this is very vertical, right? We're implementing just the APIs that we need, right? We're not. If you would have started on the server side, you would have gotten implemented very broad, very generic API because you don't really know what the user interface needs. Instead, we're always starting from the client's point of view. I need the sections that this student is enrolled in, and those use cases drive everything else, right? It drives the API that I need, the model that I need, the schema that I need, right? So it's always better to start from the use case of the point of view from the users, right? And that drives everything else, right? So here, let's implement that in the enrollment model. So we need to find sections for students. So let's implement that function, find sections for student, and here we have the student ID passed in. So we need to return all the enrollment models. So return enrollment model, right? And we're going to find. It's okay if it's an array. Find always returns an array, and we're going to filter. We only want the enrollments where the student field is equal to the student ID. And we already know that the student is values that are stored there are already student IDs, right? So the comparison is correct. They're both of the same data type. Okay? Well, actually, they're not. Right? The student ID is coming in as a string, right? But the data type of what's being stored in there is object ID. Okay? So this dot find that finder method, right, is smart enough to say, oh, I'll parse that string and I'll convert it into the right data type. It will cast it. It will convert it into object ID. So that's nice, right? The API does that for us. That's the Mongoose API. The Mongoose API understands that it's a string and it converts it into the correct data type. All right, so that's from the server's point of view. Let's see. Do we have find? All right, we have that. I think that's it. Let's restart the server. Let's go back here and log in as Po. All right, notice that it comes back with two sections. It says you are enrolled in two sections. There's two IDs where the enrollments you appear. Okay, I don't know if these were enrollments that I enrolled twice in the same section. Probably. If I go back to home and I enroll here in 56 cent, but a different section, right? Notice that it goes up to 3. All right, so we know that's working, right? It's coming back, and what we would like to be able to do is perhaps look at this section. Notice that we have the 3 sections that we're enrolled in, right? And we could just render here maybe the names of the sections, maybe the seats, but notice that what's coming back? It's coming back with the enrollments, right? The section that you're enrolled in, the student that is enrolled in. Obviously, the student is going to be the same because it's me, right? I'm the one who's enrolled. That's going to be the same for all 3 of these, right? But we have the section. Unfortunately, we don't have the section name. We don't have the seats. We don't have any of that. Right? We only have the ID, so it's kind of useless to us. Right? But nevertheless, let's render it. Let's see what it looks like. So from the client's point of view, if we go to profile content, we could iterate over these sections. It'll look something like this. Maybe it'll be UL as a list group. And we have a template for LI class list group item. And we can render here each one of the, we can iterate over this. We can say iterate over the sections, ng4. Let section of sections. And then here render the section. For now, the only thing we have is the ID. Right, so let's just render the ID. Okay, just so that we can know that we can render that. And indeed, we have the IDs, right? But it's kind of useless to us, right? We really like to see is the section name. Perhaps in the section name we have the course name as well, right? And maybe have to see how many seats there are in that section. So how do we do that? We only really have the ID. We only really have the ID. Well, as I mentioned earlier. The Mongoose provides mechanisms that allow you to implement something that looks or behaves very much like a join. Right? If this were a relational database, you would have to join two tables. Right? You have to join the enrollment table with the section table, and you grab where the IDs match, where the foreign key of the enrollment table matches the primary key of the section. Right? And now you can fetch and grab the section name, the seats, and whatnot. Yes? Well, we don't have that in Mongo. Right? The closest thing we have is the following. Right? So right here we have the find sections for student. Now that we have identified what are the objects that match, right? We could ask Mongoose to please populate. Right? Meaning, hey, that ID, I want you to replace it with the actual object that ID matches with. Right? And I have to tell it what do I want to populate. Right? I want to populate the section. Oops. I want to populate the section. Right, populate the section. And over here there's a whole bunch of things that I can transform the query. Right? This find is saying, well, these are all the records that match that query. Okay? And after that, after you have those records, you can do all sorts of transformations. Right? You can sort them. Right? You can paginate them. Right? You can do all sorts of things. Right? One of the things that you could do in the transformation is populate. Right? Replace for me the field instead of the ID. I actually want the object. Right? Go fetch that for me. Right? That will incur in a separate query. Right? But that you don't have to do. You don't have to do that separate query. Mongoose will do that separate query. That populate, we'll take a look at the ID, the actual ID, and we'll use it in a separate query. So okay, let me do a find, right? Find one where that section, and that's where it knows the section model, right? It references that particular section object. It goes fetches and replaces it, right? So you could string together multiple transformations one after another. Right, kind of like creating like a script, right? Find it and then do this and then transform it and transform it. So it creates like a long list of things that I want to do with that result set, right? So at the end of that long list of things that I could do, I need to put an exec. It's kind of like that's it. I'm done. These are all the transformations I want to apply, right? Implement all those transformations. And give me back the result, the final result. Okay? All right. So let's do that. Let's restart the server. And now let's log out and try to log in again. And let's clear this out and let's log in. All right. So it looks like nothing changed. All right. But let's take a look at what came back from the server now. If you look at the server. You'll notice that now the student is the same. See that the student is still just the ID. But the section, notice that it's been replaced by a JSON object. See that? Right? It used to be just the ID of the section. Instead, what I have now is the actual section object that goes along with that ID, right? The original ID is there, right? The original ID is there. The seats are there, right? The name of the section is there. So now we could iterate over that, over the section, and now actually display the ID for those, right? So if we go back to the client side, instead of the ID, we can say section name, I guess. What would that look like? Let me see. Section name. Oh, there they are. Right. So a better name for these, a better name for this, perhaps this would be an enrollment. Right. Enrollment section name. Right. That would make it. That might be a better semantic name for what these things are. Right. It comes back with an enrollment. That makes sense. Right. I might also perhaps display right next to this, maybe in parentheses, the seats. Right, the seats, 10, 10, 31, right? Notice that I enrolled twice in the same section, right? So that's displaying the same thing. And obviously the nice thing, the additional thing that we would want here is maybe a button that would allow us to unenroll from that section, right? And we'll take a look at that next.